Good evening, everyone. It is April 12th, 2023. Welcome to Recharging Chat. I am Sharon Kimberly Cravens, and I'm here with Dr. Luann Murato. We are excited to bring you live and in person, unlike last week, where we phoned a friend and called in from Costa Rica. Tonight, we're here to discuss HMET Binder. So, it's really exciting when we look at what's going on in the world, what we're exposed to chemically, and what do we have available to help us pull things out of our body. HMET is one of the most powerful binders around. So we want to start with a friendly reminder, disclaimer, that these videos we're putting out for you are just meant to be educational, informational, and are not intended to treat, diagnose, cure in any person or issue. All right. So with that caveat being said, tonight we're going to talk about HMET. Why is it named that? So it should be obvious, but some people are wondering. HM, heavy metals. ET, not phone home aliens, it's environmental toxins. So those two things together is what this binder is specifically targeting. And before I get into explaining what's in it and some of the frequently asked questions and some testimonials like we usually do, Dr. Land has a really special angle on why HMET is so potent and powerful in removing one of the greatest offenders out in the world, and that is glyphosate. So I'm sure most everyone here knows about glyphosate, has heard of it. If you haven't, take it away, Dr. Lulu.
Okay, 1 second. I've got a few people texting me that they're trying to get in, and I'm having to give them some help here. So give me 1 minute, please.
No problem. Yeah, it's all good. We had trouble getting in our own call 2 weeks ago. So technical things happen. One of the things that's really important about this binder is that we were talking about a little earlier. With some of the other binders, intuitively, you might want to take more. You might feel like your body wants more of like biotoxin binder. With HMET, there's sort of a limit with you don't need to go beyond a certain amount. And we'll talk about dosing a little bit later. It is designed to be introduced into a protocol at a certain time. So if you're on the comprehensive protocol, it is specifically placed in the phase 4 so that it can really dig deep into the body. So that's what's really special about it. And looks like you're ready.
I am ready. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Take it away.
Okay. So you wanted me to speak about glyphosate, right? Is that what you just said?
I think so, yeah, because HMET specifically targets the pesticides, the herbicides, the fungicides, and the greatest offender of those, as we all know, is glyphosate.
Yes. So glyphosate, as also known as Roundup, is it's the most common used pesticide, herbicide in the United States. And 20% of the consumption of it worldwide is used here in the United States. So what they originally used glyphosate for was to break the minerals off of like metals and piping. And what it does is it binds in our body to many minerals. So the body can't use the minerals that they're supposed to use because the glyphosate is binding to them. It's a plant killer, basically. It kills all the plants except for the plants that have been genetically modified to be glyphosate resistant. Okay, so what it does in the pathway of inside the plant is there's a pathway called the HMET pathway, and what it does is that's the pathway that the plant uses to make energy, and it stops that. Now, there's this Dr. Don Huber. He was the expert in glyphosate, and he started doing a lot of research on it. And then Dr. Stephanie Seneff, she was a senior researcher at MIT. And she started to really open up people's eyes to the toxic effects of glyphosate. And it's a big disruptor inside of our body. The reason out of the HMET binder works with eliminating a lot of the heavy metals and environmental toxins, but the reason I'm focusing on glyphosate is because it is one of the big problems that we see when we do a lot of tox panels on people who come in. Glyphosate is one of the big ones that show up for everybody. And what glyphosate does, some of the main toxic effects it has in our body is it disrupts the production of the synthesis of glycine. The protein synthesis of glycine occurs in our gut biome. And what it does is it swaps glyphosate out for glycine. So what happens is it alters our DNA protein, and it gets rid of the glycine instead of destroying the glyphosate. So to break this down, glycine is an amino acid that we need in our body. And when we have glyphosate through air intake, however we intake it, it's mostly we get in our body mostly through our food. So what happens is where the glycine is supposed to, it has receptor sites that are very similar to glyphosate. So they compete for that receptor site, and the glycine gets pushed out of the way and the glyphosate binds into these receptor sites. So what we're seeing is in ligaments, like our connective tissue ligaments, we're seeing a breakdown of those structures. We're seeing people's ligaments get injured more readily, like younger kids who are playing on the soccer field they're exposed to a lot of glyphosate in the soccer field. And what we have been seeing over in just my career, the past 30 years, is I see kids at a younger age who have minor injuries, or something that would be a minor knee injury that they normally would get playing soccer, that is turning into more of, oh, the ligament was just so unstable it couldn't hold, and then they blow their knee out. And the link being their glyphosate destroying those ligaments in their body. What other things that glyphosate can do is it impairs something called CYP P450. There are enzymes that are in the body that are used for a lot of different types of neurological functions. So we see an increase in neurological disease. We see an increase in autoimmune disease. We see kidney failure. We see increase in insulin resistance, increase in diabetes and cancer. And one of the big things that we see glyphosate impacting is pregnancy. It shortens the gestation period, and it disrupts the hormones. So what we've been noticing with the HMET binder is that people who were unable to conceive, after they go through this process and they're using the HMET binder, they are now, after clearing the glyphosate out of their body, they're able to get pregnant, which is pretty speaking. Other things that glyphosate impacts is the bone. They find the highest concentrations in bone marrow. There was a researcher, Dr. Anthony Samsel is his name, and he did a lot of studying on this. And what he found is that it destroys our biology at the cellular level, one molecule at a time, through disrupting the proteins and the protein signaling, which has cascading events, and it kills us like a slow cumulative poison. Now, there's a lot of people doing research on it, and they're saying that it's non-toxic in the conventional sense, but when we look at it, like Dr. Anthony Samsel is pointing out, it's on such a deep level in the way that it sneaks in and breaks down and disrupts the protein signaling, that it's just a very low long-term process of debilitating. They also link it to food allergies, because what happens is when you're taking the glyphosate in, it gets through the blood-brain barrier, and because it's breaking down the like I was talking about before, the proteins. And so what's happening is you're setting up things like leaky gut, creating a weaker immune response, stuff getting into the blood-brain barrier because it's in your bloodstream. And then you kind of set off like an active antibody response to the protein. So now you're having something that looks like an antibody reaction, which is an expression of allergies or gluten intolerance or celiac disease, to name a few things that people commonly see. So you might not be allergic to gluten, right? You might have an issue with the glyphosate. Okay, so it really affects our collagen. 25% of our body is made up of collagen. 25% of the amino acids in collagen, the 25% of them is glycine. So if glyphosate is swapping out glycine in our body, then that's a large percent of our collagen that's being affected by this. So, if you think about where is collagen, it's in your bones, it's in your joints, it's in your vasculature system. And so they're even linking it to rheumatoid arthritis. And a lot of the ligament and joint problems can be changed by cleaning this out of the body. Never mind the long-term effects of the, cancers and the other things that they're saying, well, we can't prove that it causes cancer. There's so much back and forth with that, but we see how the process breaks everything down. And there's so many studies being done on it. And if you look at the use of it over the years, from 2014 to 2018 to the present, we've looked at maps of the United States and seen how much it has increased. But what they're going to do this year is they're on the books to have a court hearing on it, because there's so many people that are really getting involved in trying to stop the use of glyphosate.
Yeah, thank heavens, because this is just like, glyphosate is bad news. It is the worst. It's the worst thing on the planet, I feel, that we know of. And HMET binder takes it out of your body. continue on.
So yeah, with the HMET binder, it binds to the glyphosate and it pulls it. It's one of it is the best thing that we have found on the market to take glyphosate out of your body. So they've done studies on using glyphosate, and within a couple of weeks, the glyphosate markers in the body after using HMET binder, have significantly reduced in just a couple of weeks. But that being said, again, this glyphosate is a problem in our food supply. And so it's something that we constantly have to stay upon, up on the daily, that needs to be brought into our awareness and other people's awareness to make sure that we do things to continuously clear this out.
Yeah, and if you want to dive into this, which you can easily, you could just go to this book that was written by an incredible woman. She's a senior research scientist for MIT. Her name is Dr. Stephanie Seneff. She wrote Toxic Legacy, and it's basically going over all the effects of Monsanto's product, Roundup, which has glyphosate in it, and just the devastating effects of this being sprayed on farms and being, trickling down through our food. And the agricultural companies claim that it is safe for animals and humans. So she's written this incredible book, and it's a testament to the legacy that is being left by this incredibly destructive chemical. And we just think about it being in the ground, but it's in our bodies. And I can speak to that. I had a full environmental toxin and heavy metal panel, a gut zoomer done by Vibrant Labs, and my glyphosate was off the charts. How would any of us know that, right? Unless we had an advanced test like this done. A basic CBC Chem 7 panel is not going to show that. It was out of pocket, whatever, I'm paying for it, I don't care, but it's stool, it's urine, it's blood. And it was just like off the charts. So I would encourage you to check that book out. I just put it in the chat, is where you can get that book. It's really fascinating, and it's a pretty quick read. Do you want to show the map about the pesticides, Lou?
You can pull it up. Yeah, if you have the map that I was just talking about, you can pull it up and put it on the screen so they can see.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you have all of them or just one, what year you have.
I have 2019. You want to show that one?
Yeah.
Or do you want before and after, like the earliest, 1992?
Whatever you have, you can just put it up so they can have an idea.
Okay, just for contrast. So here we have the map of, this is the USGS website. So this is like is this a water, you sent this to me, you take it, Luann.
Yeah, so you can pull this stuff up just as agricultural use of glyphosate. So this website itself gives you a lot of information about just different water qualities, different things, all over the United States. But this map here is showing us, so we've got 2019 pulled up. This is showing us where you see the dark colors. This is where the most glyphosate is used for agriculture. And you can go through this in the different years. And what I was saying before when I was talking about it, this one only goes up to 2019, but if you click back, go back to 2016 and see if it'll come up. So you can see here, it's easier to see when they're side by side, but if you see side by side over the years, they have just kept increasing the amount that's used. So you can see where it's the darkest, people who live in this part of the country are exposed to most of it. And you can see over in California, there's a great section where a lot of our food supply comes from, but this is also agricultural. This is sprayed on fields. This is sprayed everywhere. And the thing that they don't spray organic farming with it, but unfortunately, it has been carried over through the air and it has gotten into some of the organic crops as well. The good news is that a lot of companies now are testing for glyphosate. So there are foods that you can get that you'll see on the label tested for glyphosate. And so there's a few more popping up every day that you can see if your food has if your food has glyphosate in it or not. There's a couple of Farmers Who Know is a brand that use it. I'll get a list. I don't have it like handy right now, but there is a list of some companies that do test for glyphosate, and more are getting on that train.
Yeah, and you could just do a search for that. But just even scrolling and looking at the difference in 1992, I mean, the country is basically light yellow. So the parts, it's just night and day compared to what's happening now. So as far as, that's the bad news, right? That's glyphosate. The good news is that HMET was obviously created, as Dr. Liu said, it was inspired really by Dr. Don Huber. And he worked with Cellcore's scientists in designing HMET Binder. So he helped them to understand the molecule of glyphosate to see what it could actually bind to and how it could pull it out of the body. So even though Cellcore came out with HMET in 2008, 2009, they were threatened by Monsanto. So they had to pull it and they couldn't release it. And it kind of shook them up. They were, a little bit confronted by being threatened. So it speaks to the effectiveness and the potential for this product being of great use, but they had to go dark with it. So that was many years ago. Obviously that's changed, and Cellcore and we have HMET now, which is super exciting. So that's a blessing. Times are changing, and there are just so many poisons out there and chemicals. And this is such an amazing product that's really has changed the game from all aspects. As far as, like Dr. Liu mentioned, people who are having fertility issues, people that are overwhelmed with toxicity. So what's really exciting is that it binds to heavy metals. It is the product that does a real deep cleansing of the heavy metals that we all need taken out. It binds onto environmental toxins, and that's what we mentioned before. Fungicides, I don't ever think about that, pesticides, herbicides. So that glyphosate, when Dr. Don Huber approached their lead scientist, his name is Jeff Griswold, he told them, we need a solution, the world needs a solution. And that's where HMET really was birthed from. And Dr. Don Huber's been studying glyphosate since 1975, which is the year after glyphosate was created. And he is the top researcher expert on glyphosate outside of someone actually working for Monsanto. So he knows what he's doing. And he gave his thumb drive with all the research and all of his findings from years of studying it to Cellcore's chief scientist. So right there, it's like, okay, I feel like we're covered, right? The most important thing to know about HMET Binder is that it is energized and it is very small. So if you've been on our other calls, you probably know then that it can get into the cells, and it also then can cross the blood-brain barrier. And that way it can really clean up the body from these very detrimental and various environmental toxins and heavy metals. And all of the binders, including HMET, ViRadChem, and biotoxin binders, they all have small, medium, and long chain carbons, which basically help to leave a third of the carbons in the GI tract, and that allows for a binding to really occur. So the toxins can then be just pulled out. And those are toxins that we get exposed to in our food, and then they go systemic and can really go absorb into the body, because it is these toxins that we accumulate over time that really allow for our mitochondrial energy to decline. So it's that long-term exposure that just affects our health in a negative way. So this can create a lot of oxidative stress in the mitochondria in the cell, and then problems in the cell processes themselves. So HMET binder is like a magnet for glyphosate. And that's just super cool to me. Once it's not just like willy-nilly binding on, once it's bound to it, it is not letting go of it. It is covalently binding. And as it is binding, as with the other binders, it is binding onto the toxins and helping to repair and restore the tissues that get inflamed from the toxic exposure. So the ingredients are the extracts of the humic and fulvic acids, polyelectrolytes, polysaccharides, and polysaccharides are just sugars that the cells can take and they turn it into acetylcholine. And that goes through the Krebs cycle. Polyelectrolytes are the N ions and K ions that are in our cells that they need to electrify them. And they're supercharged with electrons, and then they increase the electroconductivity in the cell membrane. So essentially the polyelectrolytes and the polysaccharides are both really important for cell energy, but they have different mechanisms. The polysaccharides also act as a signaling molecule, and they're also an energy source. So this is all part of their unique and patented carbon technology, which also has the dibasic acid of fulvic acid, and that helps to donate oxygen ions. So essentially, that makes up the binding capabilities of HMET. And then if you recall from last call, or maybe it was the one before, one of the things that they add in as well is the broccoli sprout extract. And they had a little bit of micronized zeolite clinoptilite. I think I'm saying that right. Clinically, this is like one of the most powerful products, one of the most powerful binders that's out there, let alone the category that it's in. So it's very, very strong. And you can start with it early if you need to, if you're on a protocol, but they designed it specifically to be taken later as you're digging deep in the detoxification process. So that's a little bit about HMET. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Liu, about dosing, as far as what's standard, what's good for sensitive people, and what's good if you want to get a little bit aggressive.
Okay, so standard dosing is 1 capsule twice a day. Usually with the other binders, we do 2 capsules twice a day, but this is a little bit larger capsule. And so we do 1 twice a day. And we could work up to 2 twice a day if, if need be. Now, for sensitive dosing though, we want to maybe even do a half a capsule twice a day. Some people have gone aggressively with this and they worked up to 3 caps twice daily, and sometimes even up to 4. But this is a lot, and even 1 twice a day can be a lot for some people, because some people experience with this because that HMET, as it's binding to and pulling out a lot of these environmental toxins that we mentioned, one being glyphosate and the heavy metals, they're very strong. And you can have your skin can get very itchy. And that's one signal that's like, okay, this is working and there's a lot in your body that's trying to come out. So you can slow it down to a sensitive dose and just do 1 capsule. And you can split that in half and do a half a capsule in the morning and a half a capsule at night. But for a tip on HMET is, open up at least 1 of the capsules, or even 2, put it in some water and drink it. So it helps to absorb the toxins in the mouth, and as it's going down into the gut and into the stomach for absorption. And because when we eat stuff, that's the first area that's going to get bombarded with the toxins is our mouth. So opening up a capsule could be very helpful. But be careful when you open this, because it's really, you'll see it's dark and it's messy. So don't be wearing your beautiful white shirt or anything when you're opening this. Maybe put on your apron and be careful when you're working with it. And these have a half-life of 12 to 18 hours. So you can make sure that when you take them, like always we say, keep the binder at least an hour away from the para 1, the mimosa pudica seed. And the same thing with the Viride Chem or the biotoxin binder. Keep it away from that mimosa pudica seed.
Yeah, and also if you're on any pharmaceuticals, it's good to keep binders 2 hours away. Is that right?
Yeah, we keep everything 2 hours away from pharmaceuticals.
It's just good to recap. So one of Dr. Todd Watts's favorite products is HMET because he travels so much and it has the power to bind to glyphosate and remove that out of the body. And when he's traveling and eating out and he's all over the place, he takes it with him. It's his go-to, just to be able to go out in the world and eat and not have reactions to the toxins. So it not only pulls it out, but it helps reduce the reactions that we normally have. So if you're on the product for a little while, you might notice, and I didn't even connect this until I researched this. You might notice that you are less sensitive to gluten or to glyphosate exposure itself, chemicals in general. I feel like now I can have gluten and I feel good still, which is pretty amazing. And I have to say that's probably because of HMET binder. So that's phenomenal in and of itself. I mean, really, instead of I used to always take, different kind of enzymes and things. This is just a completely different avenue to cleaning up the aquarium. So the other thing that helps with breaking down the chemicals alongside HMET is CT-zyme itself. That helps your body break down the chemicals so you do not absorb them. It helps you to just release them. There are obviously other pesticides out in the world, but we just hear so much about glyphosate that HMET also cleans up as well. But just a couple of frequently asked questions with this. If you have amalgam fillings, a lot of people are concerned about taking HMET binder. Is it safe? People have a lot of concerns about that. What's your answer on that one?
Yes, it is safe to take if you have amalgam fillings. You could just, if you have the fillings in your mouth though, and you open a capsule, don't swish it around in your mouth so much. Just, you can take it and drink it, or you can take it and swallow it whole. But you're not going to have a lot of effects that other chelating products have when you're taking the HMET binder, because it is safe, even if you have fillings. Yes.
Cool. What if people have symptoms? Do they stop it? Do they pull back? And because a lot of people might have headaches or things like that come on when they take these kinds of binders.
Yeah. So if you are having symptoms that you can have, just because you're detoxing, when we go into phase 4, when we start taking the HMET binder, that's when we're starting the real part of the detox in the comprehensive protocol. So just like if we're detoxing alcohol or drugs, they're all chemicals. So you might get a headache. So you can offset this with taking IFC, which is one of the products we recommend, because that's a inflammatory control. So that's going to help increase the antioxidants in your body and it'll help reduce that dramatically. You can also, if you're having other symptoms besides headache, like we were discussing before, like the itching, you can reduce the amount that you're taking and just slow it down. And at the same time, you want to increase your drainage pathways, making sure you support your mitochondria so you have the energy to do this. Because you're eliminating a lot of microorganisms, a lot of toxins, pathogens. So maybe you just slow everything down a bit and not push so hard, and just dose a lot less. And when you get your feet underneath you and you feel like, okay, you're stable and you feel a little bit stronger, and you slow down the elimination process, then you can go back and start taking a little bit more. But you're not trying to push a high dose. Everybody's different. You don't want to like let's have a race and push a high dose so I could get to the end of this year. If it takes you longer, that's okay, because we all have a lot of stuff in our bodies and we're constantly being exposed to it daily, even though we're taking stuff out and changing our diet and changing our lifestyle. We're still having that exposure. So, you just slow everything down and just take your time and go with what your body can handle, support your drainage, support your mitochondria.
Yeah, slow and steady wins the race with
Yeah.
that. Sure. Being patient is tough. Detoxification takes time. It really does. And, I always think of it as yelling at a baby that's learning to walk. This doesn't really help, right? So just instead encourage, lovingly notice how you're feeling. If you're having some stuff, just step off the gas, no big deal. Another question is, and I think we know the answer. Does HMET binder work with other binders? Can I use them together, or is it something I should take on its own?
Yeah, they all go together and they help upregulate. So you can upregulate the amount you're taking, and we always do it in order. We started off biotoxin binder, then we introduced Virad Chem, and now HMET is what we're talking about tonight. But just like we had said on the last call, the Virad Chem is actually 1/3 HMET binder. So that might not be enough for your needs, but with just the Virad Chem, so you might have to take the HMET binder on its own, but you can definitely mix them together. And with that being said, I need to touch on the heavy metals. Okay. Because we talked a lot about the environmental toxin of, glyphosate and toxins that revolve around that. But this product works a lot on the heavy metals in our body. And what do heavy metals do in our body? The main thing they do is they deplete our body of oxygen. It causes low oxygen levels when you have high heavy metals. And it causes a drop in your body temperature. So it's affecting your nervous system, dysregulation. So when you have that happening, you're creating a perfect environment for the pathogens to thrive and to proliferate inside of your body. So we use the HMET binder after the Virad Chem, because remember, when we use the Virad Chem, we're working on viral, we're working on radioactive elements and some chemicals. So everything builds on the next, as we were saying. So let's talk about iron or copper, right? You hear people say, I have high iron or I have high copper. What should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? Well, you can have high iron in your body, but there's different forms of heavy metals. You can have organic and inorganic forms of iron in your body. The cell core can bind to the inorganic form, which is the iron we do not want in our body, and it chelates it, and it pulls the harmful form out, and it removes it. And it also can transmute and transfigure the iron element or the copper element to make it safe in the body and make it into the useful form that our body needs. So that's why we use the Virad Chem Binder first, because say, for example, you're dealing with a, if you're dealing with something that's a, something that we're getting in our water supply, like, or in our house, say we have radium, that's something that's going to be removed with the Virad Chem Binder, right? But if you don't remove that, and you try to remove something like lead, right, which falls under the heavy metal, your body is going to be trying to figure out, like, it's not going to want to let it go, because there's when you have radium and lead in the body, the way these like radioactive elements and heavy metals work is they form these different types of bonds inside the body. So we remove we first go in there with the Virad Chem, and we remove the issues of like the radium or the stuff that we're getting from radioactive elements. And then we can go in and go, okay, now we can remove the lead, because you don't have that. We're not competing with that element that's in there, trying to keep it in the body, right? So you break down the toxic load first, remove part of the chemical reaction, and then we go in, and then it's easy to remove the heavy metals, which is really great with Cellcore doing that, and how they use these binders, where a lot of people who just go ahead and chelate heavy metals, they're missing that whole step, and that's why they really have trouble getting the heavy metals out of their body. And again, touching on that, we want to always make sure we're drinking distilled water, because there's so many radioactive elements like uranium and stuff that's in our water supply. Especially here in Connecticut, we have a lot of it in water supply. So again, there's so many of these different types of heavy metals that are being removed with the HMET, but the ones that our body needs, they're going to transmute them, transform them, so they become useful to our body. Make sense?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And it's a good point, because it's like the steps are there for a reason. It's formulated this way for a reason.
Right.
And I just think about even, dentistry and amalgam fillings. And I had 13. And not only the fillings themselves, but then the Novocaine, numb each tooth, and the toxicity of that. And when I was a little bit younger, I would get some blood tests done and some things, and my mercury was always off the charts. So I just thought, well, that's just how it is. I got them all removed, still off the charts. So before doing Cellcore, was pretty high. And I'm really curious to see what my results will be when I do them soon. But it's like the hero of this story is HMET Binder, but also this gentleman, Don Huber, who really raised the alarm on glyphosate. He's like the OG, he's the original researcher. And he was just like, he's a massive fan of HMET Binder. He gives it to his clients. People have heard about him and his research and his legacy, and they hear about the success that he has sharing whatever he has with people. Well, it's HMET Binder. He gives this to couples that cannot conceive, and they do after, I think, several weeks of taking the product. So that's a huge testimony. I mean, in this day and age of infertility, which is pretty rampant, well, it's no wonder if people are loaded up with glyphosate, never mind the heavy metals and the other things that are out there in our food, water, air, soil. So that is also cemented when he runs blood panels. He does before and after with his clients. So the levels of glyphosate are drastically lower after 4 to 6 weeks when he gives the HMET binder. So that is it's usually undetectable on a follow-up lab. So that shows the change in the body of just taking the binder. So that's incredible.
Yeah.
Anyone?
The other thing that they're doing that you see that we didn't really talk about, I was going to mention quickly, is that with the glyphosate is that there's they're doing a lot of research showing that you might not have problems with it in the first, like it's coming into our bodies, but then it's showing up really in issues in our offspring, and this affects them in so many different ways. So we see a lot of these kids that are, they have so many different sensitivities that they're born with, but it's another reason why, if you're going to have children, that it's a really good idea for the husband and the wife to really go through the whole comprehensive protocol and clean and prepare their bodies before they conceive. And there's a lot of preparation work that should be considered before creating a life.
Totally. That's a whole nother field. And it's extremely conscious to think that way, which is needed. I think classically or traditionally, people just think, oh, we're pregnant. Yay. Now what do we do? How about we pave the way beforehand and get ourselves aligned in all ways possible to create the most incredible being possible? Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? So I feel like that's a kind of a new burgeoning field, right? There's another testimonial that Dr. Todd shared about a client of his. It was a young girl. She was having really bad skin issues, and it wasn't eczema. It was like red, cracking skin. It was really bad. And she had been to the dermatologist. She had had steroids, creams, lotions, to no avail. They brought her to Dr. Todd, almost like a last resort. He gave her HMET binder and water, and about 3 weeks later, her skin was totally cleared. So you think about exposure to glyphosate. Was it just ingesting it? She was a soccer player. She was always on soccer field, lush lawns, grass. And since she was 3 years old, she was playing soccer. So her exposure to the toxins and herbicides was very high. And over time, glyphosate will bind to collagen and then start creating problems. So that's amazing to see the difference in such a short period of time. 3 weeks is really nothing for something that's so detrimental. And like I said, they were trying all kinds of things. They were going to different doctors. Nobody knew what to do. And the nurse would call her mother and say, she's a mess. Her hands are cracked and bleeding at school. And she'd just be crying. And her mother felt terrible, because what can you do for your child at that point? So it's really life-changing. Nothing worked until HMET binder. So that's a life-changing product just from detoxing the chemicals that she was exposed to for the short period of her life. So that is the good news, and that is pretty amazing. So if anybody has any questions off the top, pop it in the chat. Any comments, we'd love to hear from you. And if you have any experiences with this binder you want to share, it's always fun to hear. The next call is going to be in 2 weeks on the 26th of April. And I think we're going to do our final binder. Is that right? Carboxy?
Yes.
The mighty, mighty carboxy. And our next full moon is probably after that. Yeah. Because we just had our spring equinox. Let's see. Is there a way to protect young children that play soccer? Good question, Nicole. My guess is give them HMET binder.
Yes, Nicole, so definitely. But remember, HMET binder is a strong binder. So it's not something we would start off with. We would start them off with biotoxin binder. right? Because we want to gently introduce it. And a biotoxin binder is a great binder. I don't know if you were on that call or not, but you might want to go back and listen to that. And then we would work them up to taking the HMET binder. And again, we would, depending on their age and their weight, we would put them on small amounts of it. And yes, it's very good. Everybody should be on a binder, period. One type or another, because they're so good for you in so many ways, not just to detox, but they're building, they're binding, they're helping to heal, they're introducing good stuff into your gut. So yes, young children too. I have a lot of little kids that are like, 2 years old that are taking binders. So if you have any questions about that, you can talk to me personally, Nicole, and I'll help you.
Yes, and I was just looking on the recharging station website. It's rechargingstation.com. When you go there, all of the Zooms, most of them should be posted there. And I was just checking to see if the biotoxin binder Zoom is there. And if it is not, I can send that to you, Nicole. But it's pretty cool. If you go to the website, you just pop that in, and then you can go to Patient Hub, and then you scroll down and it says recharging Zoom. And then most, if not all, of the Zooms will be there. We've had just a couple of little technology hiccups, but if you want any of the recordings, if you can't get them there for any reason, just ask and I'm happy to send them to anyone. So if anybody doesn't have anything else, we'll just sign up for the evening. It's almost 9. Thank you so much for being here and for taking care of yourself, investing in your health, and rocking on, people. Rock on. I love you. Yeah. So let's see. I hope I can stop